Hi, everyone, and welcome to a Rescripted Podcast, where we could celebrate the great things in life, share about the not so great parts, and find out how we can rewrite those challenges, turn them into insightful moments that will lead us to change, to growth, to happiness, and empowerment, all so that we can live the life we truly want to experience. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing how success is actually an inside job. You see, the world can teach you so many skills, right? It could teach you how to be proficient, it could teach you how to be productive, and it can even teach you how to win. The only thing that it can't teach you, and the only thing that can't be taught, is how to be you. You see, real success can actually take quite a bit of time. And I know that in today's day, we don't like to hear that. We love the whole microwave era where we get things done in an instant. Our success started yesterday, right? But that's not really how it works. You see, things need to develop. And I know we want to cut that out. I know that we just want to learn a little bit, call ourselves experts, and then keep it moving. But the truth of the matter is you're robbing yourself from the fun of really learning how to do something. You know, to be an expert at something, you actually really have to love what you're doing. You have to be enticed by trying to figure things out. There's a beauty in it that it makes it stop being work because you enjoy it so much, whether you're figuring it out, whether you're building it, sculpting it, whatever it is, playing with it, harmonizing with it, whatever it is, that unique tool that you need to be proficient in what you do. That's such a component that you can learn about it in your textbooks, right? You can be taught about it in theory, but it's so different once you're able to develop those skill sets yourself. And those skill sets really come from experience. So it's so hard to be well-rounded or well-versed in something when you only given yourself 6 months to study it. And yes, it sounds like a long time, but to have a full cycle moment, it's not really, the 6 months is kind of like the beginning of it because things happen in stages, like I've said before, right? Everything happens in phases. But also what we don't realize is there's cycles that happen. And that's where these forecasting reports come into play. And, one season, your results are able to reflect one thing, and another season they'll reflect something different. And you need to see what's impacting that, right? Whether it's internal, whether it's something to do with you, or external factors, right, that are impacting your results. And it's so hard to get all the information that you really need to in a short span. You're not an expert if you're just giving yourself a few months to do something. You're actually just making yourself familiar with it, not an expert. And that's different. But what happens when you have invested the time and you have put in years of work, and you can call yourself an expert because you've been able to get results, right? You've been able to prove some new theory. You've been able to understand that there's a development happening in whatever it is that you're doing, whatever industry that you work in, right? You're an expert. You have skin in the game, or you just have years of experience. So you understand the ebbs and flows of it, right? But what happens when you have 10 years worth of experience and all of a sudden you get to a crossroad where you're feeling like this isn't really making sense anymore? You know, what worked before, what worked prior, is just not gelling the way it used to. And not that the market has changed, not that the industry has changed, but something internally has changed. And where you're understanding that there's a different way to achieve things and you've reached your peak. Right? You've gotten your accolades, you've been able to get the promotions, and you've been able to climb that ladder to get you where you have to. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be the corporate ladder. I mean, I think that's the most common ladder that we speak about when it's high achievers. But there's different ladders that you climb, whether it's the artistry in you, whether you want to master your artwork, or whether you're just trying to explore new terrain. You know, there is a ladder because there's always something to achieve. There's always something more to explore. There's always something more to develop, uncover, unmask. And that's what makes life exciting. But what happens when you get to your peak and you have discovered everything that there is to discover and you still feel like you're left empty? What is that signaling to you? Do you turn around? Do you give up? Do you start over? Is that the end of your journey for you? And a lot of times we get to that fork in the road. We've done all we can do in the skill sets that we have, within the environment that we have, and there's nothing else left to give. So what is there next for you? A lot of people have a career change at this moment. Some people say they have a midlife crisis. But the truth of the matter is that you're always constantly yearning for something more, because learning doesn't just happen, in some type of classroom, right? There is no just course that you take and then that's it. You know everything that there is to know in life. We know that. We've lived long enough to understand that life is something that you continuously explore by learning. And you don't always learn something in a textbook. You learn most through your experiences, right? That's why it's so important to live, to go out, to experience and travel, right? We get to learn how other people live. We get to see what other cultures really celebrate and what they really live by and what are their values. And a lot of times you need to absorb some of that so that you can realize, what are your unique values? Are they really similar to what you've been taught, or have you been tugging away internally and have something else gravitating towards you? Because when you get to this fork in the road, when you get to this peak and you have a decision to make, this is actually the best moment in life, because it's exciting and nerve-wracking all at the same time. But it is your point, it is your moment, it is the season for you to transition into your evolved self, right? This is where you get to do your stewardship. This is where you get to tap into your calling, because you learned everything that you needed to, right? In order to be successful, you follow the paths, you've been given the blueprints, and you put in the work, and you've exercised, and you've been able to execute real success. But for some reason, internally, you don't feel it. Externally, yes, you feel it, you've achieved it, you've got everything. But internally, it still feels like there's a void. There still feels like there's something that hasn't been uncovered. And that can drive you insane, because you're consumed with things, yet there's still a void. It just doesn't make sense. Logically, it doesn't make sense. See, because the truth of the matter is, where that confusion comes from is because your skills have been able to produce so much success for you, right? You have been able to win, and so much of it has been able to show you how to build off your skill sets. And although you can be successful with them, your skill sets don't really show you what your blueprint to your calling is. And that's the confusion, because we think it would. You think if you're good at something, it's showcasing what you're good at. But really what it's showcasing is what your skills are, but you haven't really quite understood how to put them all together. And to figure that out, it's a journey. You have to go on a journey. And that's something that nobody else can teach you, because nobody else knows all the beautiful facets of you, right? Your skill sets, your talents, your abilities, your know-hows, some of those secret talents that you have, all of those come into play in your calling. So it's really hard for anyone to try to tell you how to put that all together. That's an inside job. That's between you and your intuition. I'm here to just show you the signals, but you have to be the one to take the lead. Sometimes we just wish that life was as easy as it was when we were kids. There was somebody to tell us when to wake up. There was somebody to tell us which class to go to, when to have our lunch, and when to go home, when to stop playing outside, when to come home, and when to do your homework, and when to go to bed, right? There was somebody that was already in charge of your schedule, right? Everybody was there, all hands on deck to be able to get you to get to a successful point. And then all of a sudden, you are in charge. But that's where that internal constraint comes from, because you follow the path of school, you follow the path at work, and then you get to a point where you've achieved it all and nobody else can really guide you anymore, right? You're kind of on this ledge where you're just like, I either leap, right? A leap of faith and bet on myself, or do I stay here where it's comfortable? And this is the first signal of your evolution, because it's very uncomfortable. First, you feel this internal constraint of like, I've achieved everything. Why do I feel unsatisfied still? Why do I feel unfulfilled? So you keep looking for things to fill that void. You look for distractions, celebrations, you look for other things to like drown out that noise. And it may work, right? Retail therapy, it may work for a little bit, but at the end of the day, when all is said and done, that little void is still there. Well, that isn't a negative thing. That isn't proof that you're failing. That isn't proof that you are an ungrateful individual. It's proof that your calling is calling you to evolve. And the first step of understanding it is that you do develop that internal constraint, that void that wasn't there before, because you were satisfied before, right? Everything was great. You were enjoying life. And then all of a sudden this turn happened, and all of a sudden you don't know what changed, but now you're dissatisfied. Well, that is such a beautiful thing, because now it's time for you to bet on you. And there's one or two things that happen when you start to feel that internal constraint. Now it's a time and season for you to learn to bet on you, because you haven't done that. Like I said before, there was always somebody guiding you, right? When you were a child, somebody was guiding your calendar. Then when you went off to school and college, there was somebody else, telling you when to show up, what you needed to do to complete to be successful. And then you went on to work. And then there was another agenda that you had to follow in order to be successful. So you really didn't have to trust yourself so much, because you had guides throughout the way. But then you get to a point where you have to feel your calling. There's something that you're called to steward. And there's no guides that are going to be there to hand over a blueprint. And that's the part that can be really scary, because some things will shake out, right? Some things will fall out of place, but it's only to allow things to fall into place. But this is the most scary part, because this is usually later in life, after you built everything, right? After you have your success and you have everything that matters, that you feel like I've made it in life. All of a sudden there's like, this earthquake that happens in your life, and you're just like, everything's kind of shaking up. But it's calling you to trust yourself, because even if you are someone that's super successful at school or at work, and you have all the accolades and you have all the awards and you have all these trophies to prove how phenomenal you are, in essence, that's wonderful. And yes, it's great, but you are getting marriage off of somebody else's agenda, because at the end of the day, that is a form of, people pleasing, right? I'm going to do this so I can execute something where somebody else can celebrate me. But where is you celebrating you? And that's the part that's so lonely when you're developing your stewardship and being able to find your calling, because there is nobody there that's going to be celebrating your, small but monumental wins, right? There's no one there to hand you a trophy or a reward. So that's why it's so important for you to celebrate you, because nobody really knows all the things that you're overcoming. Sometimes there are silent wars that you go through that you have to overcome, these silent internal battles that you're winning, but nobody knows, because you have a beautiful smile on your face, right? And that's why they say that it's the road that's less traveled, because it's hard. It's hard to be a competent person and see everything fall apart. And sometimes you're helpless to stop it. But again, it's not that your life is falling apart. It's actually falling into place. And to give you a little secret of why all that is happening, it's not to destroy what you've done. It's really to let you know who's in charge of your life. Is it your calling? Because at that point, you're allowing yourself to get stretched, right? So you can grow, so you can evolve, so you can be better, so you can use all your skill sets. In the beginning of life, we're learning how to use one skill set at a time. And then when you get to your stewardship, you know how they all really work together. So that's why there's a season where you're stretching and you're growing. You're not breaking. You actually find yourself being strong. But it's learning how to use all these skill sets together. And that takes stretching. That takes a lot of work, personal growth, personal development, involvement. And sometimes it could be exhausting, right? So it's letting you know if you are allowing your calling to manage your life, or is it fear? Fear to step into that, because again, it's just you and your intuition. There's no one telling you how to be you except you and your intuition. So you have to trust that. So it's almost like, you're walking through it blindly, but you're trusting your intuition. And a lot of times we allow fear to govern our lives, and we've all been there, right? There is no casting stones at anybody or judgment, because we've all been there. Some of us are here in it today. Some of us just came it, and some of us will experience it later in life. But every time you come through a new challenge in life, there will be a little fear that comes up. But you're going to understand what is managing your life, what is in control and governing your life. Because if you allow yourself to play small, then you're not being the best version of yourself. Something else is impacting your decisions that is not you trusting yourself. Because if you trusted yourself, you wouldn't allow yourself to play small. It's one thing when you're growing, you may be, growing inch by inch, step by step, and that's okay. That's not fear taking over because you don't go 100 miles an hour. Growth is a level of development, so that does take time. So there's a difference. Don't confuse that. Just because it's slow, it doesn't mean that there isn't progress. But when fear is the one that's operating, it's when you'll know that it's fear when you're allowing your comforts to be your limitation. Because you're comfortable, because you have everything, you're not going to listen to the call that is allowing you to follow the footsteps of your stewardship. And again, we've all been there, so there is no judgment. It takes us a few times to hear God calling us to then be like, okay, I'll listen. Because you're so comfortable, right? Life is really comfortable. There is no reason for you to change and adapt. But there is a need for you, your gifts, your talents, your skill set. There is a need for what you do, precisely how you do it, and only you can do it. And when you finally trust yourself, and you trust your intuition, and you go on this journey, you bet on yourself, and you learn to follow your intuition to take you to what you're called to do, to see what you're supposed to steward, it allows you to see your purpose. So you feel the stretch and you're able to see the purpose. So it's kind of like going to the gym. You go to the gym, you may hate it at the moment, but you see the results. So you stay committed, you stay invested because it's good for you. Although you're not comfortable at the moment, it is good for you, right? It's good for your growth. The same thing is with your calling and your stewardship. You may be a little uncomfortable in the moments that are going to stretch you, but you understand that there's purpose in it. And in that purpose, you allow to follow the rhythm of it, because you will see that it's going to lead you to legacy. And your legacy work is where longevity is, So you don't always have to worry about following trends. You don't always have to follow what's the latest, what's the greatest, what's the market saying. You don't have to worry about any of that, because at the end of the day, your calling has longevity. Whether it's now as you're developing it, or whether it's still here after you've left, there's purpose in what you do. And when there's purpose, it's sustainable. And that's what you want to do. That's what your body is calling for. That's what your spirit is yearning for sustainability, for substance, for true authenticity that's attached to legacy. And legacy is so much better than social proof, because social proof is like a trend. Everyone cares about it today, and it's forgotten tomorrow. But legacy is going to compound on everything that you've done. And when you look at it, you look at how God has his ecosystem. It all works together, right? Everything works together. So it compounds one another, right? What you did today will build on for tomorrow. Your skill sets that you worked on yesterday, if you keep working on them, they're going to build up for today so they could be better tomorrow. So you understand that there's something that ripples through time. So your gifts then become gifts to others, right? What you're working on, how you steward, becomes something that's vital to others. And that's where you get that satisfaction from. That's where you get that pleasure of feeling purposeful. Because at the end of the day, you want to be impactful. You want to mean something. You want to be more than just a person that was part of the team. You want to make impact to where it ripples through time. And when you're building on something that has legacy level impact, it needs a lot of dedication, a lot of devotion, and a lot of your time. You see, when God calls you, he doesn't call you to have a mind divided. He calls you to be focused. And that's why he walks with you gently every day, working on something bit by bit. And it can be so consuming, but it's so impactful because it's so profound. And when you realize how important it is, you can't help but be enamored with it, engulfed by it, and you really want to learn it because it's a whole different way of experiencing your gifts, your talents, your skill sets. And if you keep at it and you're committed to it and you're devoted to it and you stay consistently walking with God, you're going to realize that all of this is going to become a sequence, right? A sequence that turns into a synchronicity, and then a synchronicity that turns into a symphony. And then you realize this is beautiful. And whatever you're doing, whatever you're called to do, there's a level of artistry that's a part of it. And that's where you get to connect with it again, connect with it on a level that logic just didn't allow you to do. And that's where I'm talking about, where you're going to start to feel that impact, because it's such a beautiful experience to walk into your stewardship, right? Be in your calling, understand the purpose of it. It's beautiful. So many of us search the whole world. Some of us die and not knowing what our purpose was, what our calling was. And I can't imagine what that's like. But to understand that it takes devoted time and sometimes isolation to be able to work on that, develop it. And like I said, you don't get all of the answers all at once. It's like a pieces to your puzzle. You get like a puzzle piece one at a time. And then when you understand the purpose of that one puzzle piece is when you're ready for the next one. But we're so used to getting all the pieces at once and figuring it out quickly. But it's like you're able, when you get one puzzle piece at a time, it's like you are able to appreciate that puzzle piece so much more. You understand the meaning of it. You understand why it is an important piece and why the whole puzzle will be incomplete without that one piece. That's how profound, that's how layered, that's how in-depth God will walk with you when you are on your journey to figuring out what your purpose is and understand what you're called to steward. And doesn't that sound so much better? Don't you want to work in a way that you feel like your life has become this symphony, versus being in the rat race of trying to figure things out, and you finish one thing and then all of a sudden you got a different pile, and then you work on that pile and then all of a sudden you have something else, and you feel like they're disconnected, right? It's disjointed. You don't feel like they work together. Well, I'm not saying that you're not going to be working in your stewardship. Of course, you're called to do something, but it all makes sense and it all works together. And part of it is rest. And when you look at God's work, He added in rest for a reason. So it is very, very vital for you to rest, just as it is very, very vital for you to listen to your intuition. And I'm sure it's so easy for you to say what you do, what you're good at. But is it easy for you to say who you are? Is that an easy description for you to say also? Or when it comes to that, who you are outside of your profession, do you know who you are? Do you know what your purpose is? We know, you know you're special. But do you know why? Because in that why is really where your true safety net is. You see, in my coaching, I teach you from going from internal constraint, where you feel that void, to having internal alignment. Because knowing who you are, knowing what you're made for, what you're called to steward, what your purpose is, that has longevity, that has your legacy. And that is your safety net, because you're entrusting in what you were called to do, which nobody else can tell you. It's just between you and your intuition. And I know that we have a lot of safety nets. We really do. We really have so many external safety nets. But what if I was to tell you that if you were to be faithful in this walk, in your journey, God would be the protector of your safety nets? Would you trust in that? Is that a good security plan? And the beauty is that He would definitely stretch you, but He won't forsake you. So if you are feeling that void and you're just like, I achieved everything, but I still feel like something's not right, or for whatever reason you don't feel fulfilled in life, then I invite you to go ahead and do the quiz that I have, the internal constraint quiz, and see where your internal constraint lies. There are 5 different components, 5 major components that the majority of high achievers experience that are blocking them from really being able to step into their calling, or even knowing what their calling is at all. But if you feel like you have already understood, you've already taken the test, you've already done the workbooks, and you are ready to do the work, then I do invite you to book a call with me so we could see if my coaching program, Tailor Your Life, is right for you at this moment. Because in that, we're able to dissect what it is that's truly standing in your way so that you can fully blossom and bloom in your stewardship. And don't worry, I will not leave you alone. This is a live coaching program that I do for 8 weeks. I do have an intake form that I have you fill out just so that we can get an understanding of where you are and how we can move forward with you. What is your starting point? Because not everybody starts in the same point. And like I said before, there's only so much when it is your calling, when it is your purpose, when you are developing who you really are. There's some things that are universal, but there's other things that are so much more individualized. So I wouldn't be able to do this just all pre-recorded. There are some components that you're able to go have resources for, but the majority of the program is a live program for 8 weeks. So if you are ready to step into your stewardship, understand what your calling is so you can feel more purposeful in life, I invite you to book a call and we can discuss that further. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And if you enjoyed this episode and feel like it was insightful, then I ask you to please rate it, like it, and subscribe, and share it with someone you feel will enjoy it. I'll be back here next week and we will continue to discuss matters regarding personal development. Take care, guys. Have a blessed week, and I'll see you next time.